I must welcome you with great pleasure to this final session for today, Hunter Innovation Forum. Now, it has rather uncharitably been suggested that we ought to rename this forum the Innovative Women Forum, Hunter Innovative Women Forum. I think that's rather a good idea. But in fact, that's not a fair comment. The very fact that we've determined to have this final session is due to the fact that we were really quite concerned when we looked at the wonderful speakers that we had lined up for the 2.5 days of this Hunter Innovation Forum to see how few of them were women. We needed to address that deficit, and we did that in a way that we think was quite innovative. We thought what we will do is invite some very innovative women whom we know with a glass of champagne. We will invite some other very innovative women and men to come along in the audience with a glass of champagne, and we will have an informal, I hope, entertaining and informative discussion at the end of what's been a very big, very busy, very worthwhile day. I know many of you have been here with us during the day, and we've had the pleasure of hearing some really very inspiring addresses from many University of Newcastle researchers and others. And of course, we've got tomorrow at NBN Studios, and it's not too late if you haven't yet registered to attend those sessions. There's no cost, but there is a limit on numbers. So please go onto our website and register if you'd like to attend, to come along to the sessions. They begin at 10:30 tomorrow, focus on creative industries, media, communications, writing, filmmaking, etc. at NBN. But for the moment, we have our panel of innovative women, and they're a wonderfully diverse and interesting panel, connected by the fact that they are not only innovative, but very smart, very significant leaders in their fields in Newcastle and in the region, and we're delighted to have them here. So let me introduce them in turn. To begin with, Dr. Melanie James. Those of you who've been following the Facebook feed will know that Melanie has a very interesting, diverse background. She has been a travel agent. She has sold cosmetics. She has worked as a journalist. She has just got her bronze medallion. So she's very sporty. And she's also a senior lecturer in communications at the University of Newcastle, and is about to have a very significant publication released, published by Routledge in the UK, about positioning. Very interesting work that she's done. Our next speaker is Shakti Durga. Shakti Durga has released herself from a very senior corporate role in Sydney and has found a new calling, and is leading a group of extremely innovative people, most of them women, who are running small and even micro industries in the area of meditation, relaxation, spirituality. The organisation is called the Shanti, or Peace Mission, and I'm delighted to say that Newcastle Now, the Business Improvement Association, have contributed to the success of that organisation through organising a collaborative workspace for Shanti Mission in Newcastle. From that base, they have developed a very successful international organisation. Our third speaker is Catherine Wilkinson. Catherine is a partner at Sparke, Helmore. She specialises in the area of workplace relations. She's a very accomplished, admired senior individual. That's not why I invited her. I invited her because she's one of the most amusing, entertaining, vibrant people I know. So I have told her, you have been invited because you are so funny, and I have in fact offered her my services as her talent manager should she determine to leave Sparke and go it alone. There's some pressure on you, Catherine. And our final speaker, I'm sure, is familiar to you all. It's our own Vice-Chancellor from the University of Newcastle, Professor Carolyn McMillen. I think her innovations are well known, or her significant innovations are well known to most of us in regard to the very important strategic changes she is making to the way the university operates in terms of connectedness between the university and industry and the community. We're already seeing the fruits of that. It's benefiting us all, and we're looking forward to seeing further results there. In addition, of course, Professor McMillen is a very accomplished, world-respected researcher in her own right, and is continuing her research activity. So, Evelyn and I will be sharing the role of emceeing this session. We've all got a glass of champagne, I hope, and I think that that will make us feel nice and relaxed. And I've told our panellists that however eminent and senior they are, we want them to feel relaxed and to speak freely, and for this to be an entertaining conclusion to a big day. So I'd now like to hand over to Evelyn, who will explain what's happening first.
So just to set the scene, these are highly accomplished and eminent women, so we gave them some very low order instructions. One was to share with us something about an innovation they had tried, how it went, what happened, what they learnt from it. And the second thing was if they could scrape up some special tips that might help the rest of us do something. Now, over the last couple of days, we've heard a lot about what makes innovation work, what innovation is, what people have to do in order to bring change about. One of the key messages that I heard was that you need to celebrate your successes, and from this morning's BRW breakfast that you need to celebrate your failures. The other message was you need to feel the fear and do it anyway. Now, because we're going to try something a little bit innovative, you need to know that if this doesn't work, it's my neck on the line, so you better make it work. We've asked Shakti Durga to spend a few minutes helping all of us who fear making a fool of ourselves, getting things wrong, doing things the wrong way, all of that stuff which I think afflicts women particularly, to use some of the techniques she uses to help us get rid of that. And it's probably not what you usually experience in what is a business meeting, but I've seen her do it and I think it's special. Shakti Durga, no pressure.
Okay, thanks. So good afternoon, everybody. Seeing as we are at an innovation conference, are you up for something innovative? Please say yes. All right, maybe the first thing would be, if you're drinking champagne, please have another drink right this moment. Help you relax. Cheers. Here's to us. And the next thing we're going to do is a little process that we use in Shanti Mission all the time, and we use it whenever we have issues to deal with. And quite often what we find is that issues have their roots in our unconscious, not just in our conscious minds. And these techniques sometimes help us to achieve breakthroughs in areas where the energy's just been stuck for a really long time. So in anyone's business, have you ever found that there's a place sometimes you get to where it just doesn't seem to matter what you try, you're stuck? Put your hand up if you've ever had that kind of situation in your enterprise. Yeah, big ones, small ones, I think we all have that. So I just would like you to be open to this practice and just try it on. So we're not trying to convince you of anything. All we're wanting to do is have an experience together. So is that okay? So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. It's kind of like a relaxing thing, a bit like meditating. And I want you to take a couple of deep breaths and imagine that you can send the breath down through your body and out through your feet. I know you can't do that anatomically, but just pretend and send. Very good. Take another deep breath in And imagine you can breathe out the back of your body. Just imagine you can send energy out the back of your body. And one more big breath in. Again, breathing down through your body and releasing that breath into the ground, just with your intention and visualisation. And now what I'd like you to do is just touch your heart area with your left hand, and I would like you to bring to your mind someone that you love very much. Someone, if you have grandkids, they're perfect for this. If you're a bit young for that, your beloved, or someone really special. And just really focusing on the area that your fingers are touching in the middle of your chest. And just trying to feel that love right now, even though they're not here with you perhaps. Just feel what it's like when you really feel connected to them, when you look into their beautiful eyes. And just breathing that love right deeply into your body and filling your whole body. You can just put your hand down whenever you're ready. So I call on our spirits and the divine, if you believe in the divine, by whatever name or style suits you. And if you don't have a faith belief, then just think of that love you just felt there and call on that. And take a deep breath in. And we're going to do some energetic releases around fears to do with innovating. So just one more deep breath in and just say, I now release any conscious or unconscious fear of being an innovator. Breathe deeply in and release through the head region. Imagine you can breathe out through the whole of the head region. That's good. First go. We're going to do that one again. So just, this is as hard as it gets. Take a deep breath and say, I now release all conscious and unconscious fears of being a real innovator. Take a deep breath in and releasing through the head region. Say, I now release the fear of the unknown that may hold me back from the innovation zone. Breathe deeply in and out through the back of the heart area, out through the back of your body. Say, I now release all fear that if we do really innovate, I won't be able to cope with the change. Breathe deeply in and release through the back of the body. Say, I release all fear that my personal and professional systems will not cope with real innovation. Breathe deeply in. Imagine you can breathe down your arms and out through your hands. Say, I release all fear that I'm either too young or too old or too male or too female to really be an innovator. Breathe deeply in and release everywhere. Very good. Say, I release all fear that I'll be disapproved of if I do things differently. And I set all of that free from my whole being now. Breathe deeply in and releasing everywhere through your whole body. Sometimes you can feel tingling in your body as this happens. That's okay. Just energy moving. And so just say, I now choose to try on being an innovator more than I ever have before. I choose to have confidence in myself and in my creativity. Through grace, so be it. Breathe deeply in and expanding everywhere. Say, it's easy for me to see areas where things can be improved and to be empowered to make those improvements. With humility and humour. So be it. Breathe deeply in and expanding. Imagine your energy is expanding into the potential that we all have. And say, it's so marvellous that I've found like-minded people with whom to share the innovation space. Breathe deeply into that heart centre, into that place of love again, and then breathe normally. And now let's just have some visualising for the hunter. So just imagine you can breathe in between the eyebrows and then out through the back of the head. This is kind of yogic exercise a little bit. And just say, it's so marvellous that the hunter has gone from strength to strength and is known and admired as an innovative region where people collaborate easily and effectively, profitably and sustainably, breathing in and expanding everywhere. Say, our region is clean and green. All of the ecological issues have now been solved. We support our young people and the place is fantastic. Breathe deeply in and expand everywhere. So we experience innovations in building, digital technology, material sciences, creative and heavy industries, and we rock. Breathe deeply in and expand everywhere. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and, if necessary, have another glass of champagne. And possibly just a short chat about how that experience was for you. Thank you.
Well, I think that was something really very special. And I have to say that I have attended one of Shakti Durga's sessions and found it really marvellous. And I think we cannot separate the personal from the professional. And if we as individuals don't feel free and confident and good, then almost nothing is possible. And as Evelyn has said, those barriers that we put up, especially as women, can be really inhibiting. So I think that exercise was really something special. But we have set our panel a task, and we have asked them to respond to the question, could you please tell us about something innovative that you have done in your life? It may be professional life, it may be your personal life that was innovative, and what the impact of that was. And I think to begin, yes, Dr. James. Good.
It was hard to decide what to pick to talk about, but I've decided to go back to the late 90s when I was the first ever New South Wales State Public Relations Manager for the Red Cross Blood Service. But not just for the blood service, I was actually employed to do PR for organ donation. Organ donation had been on the decline right through the 90s for various reasons, which I won't go into right now, but they basically employed me to change that. And so I thought, great, fine, excellent. And as well as being a travel agent and all those other things, I was also an ICU nurse for many years. So what happened was I ended up, I walked in and they basically said, oh, great, you're here. You know, thank God you're here. We really need a new brochure. And maybe a new slogan. You know, that bumper sticker that the Rotary Group, you know, don't take your organs to heaven. Heaven knows we need them here, which is a really good message, but it had been around since the 70s and there hadn't really been anything else. And I kind of went, oh, okay, good, fine. Shortly after that, I found myself asked to do a presentation, and I really embraced this idea, and I'm not just sucking up to my boss. I really do embrace this idea of disruptive innovation and creativity, because I was asked to go to Parliament House in Australia and address the National Transplant Advisory Committee, and the Ministers for Health and all this kind of very learned, conservative group who were all looking at me to come up with the right slogan. And that's what they had reinforced. And I put up a slide behind me that said, why organ donation is like cornflakes. And a big packet of cornflakes. And they all looked at me, a bit shocked, because they didn't know how to use PowerPoint back then. That was the main shock. But why is organ donation like cornflakes? And so what I had done was very quickly I had realised what was going on. Because I had my nursing background, my journalism background, PR background, you put those things together in a mixing bowl and kind of see what comes up. And when I looked at it, I went to the social marketing literature, which was just emerging at that time, where the old 4 Ps for marketing could be applied to social issues. And so I asked these guys, and they were basically all guys apart from Deborah Veron at Prince Alfred, and I said, what product are you offering the Australian people? No, product. I said, well, you know, organ donation, what is it? You know, what are you asking people to do? Oh, we'll donate organs. And I said, well, that sounds a bit like Frankenstein, doesn't it? It's a bit macabre. It's a bit weird, really, when you think about it. And they kind of went, oh. And I said, OK, let's move on. What about the place, the second P, product, place? Place. I said, well, where are you asking families to donate the organs of a deceased loved one? I said, I know exactly where you donate it, being an ICU nurse. It's in the corridor of the ICU unit. Or it's at the bedside when they're in the most horrible grief situation you could find yourself in, usually with a young person that's had an accident and they're on a ventilator and they're brain dead. I mean, the most tragic circumstances. And that's when you're approaching the family. Or, as I said, you might take them out into the corridor or even the equipment room. I've seen that too. Very good. What about the price? What price are you asking people to pay for this? And we looked at what pain are you putting people through? How are you supporting people in the pain? What's actually happening here? And then we looked at the final P, which was promotion. And I said, look, when you guys, and they, as I said, all guys, get the promotion, get the product right, the price acceptable, and the place right, I'll start looking at the promotion. That, I think, was the first time they had thought about organ donation in that way and set a whole lot of things in train to today, where we have the National Organ Donor Registry. We have a much better education program for ICU staff. We have a much better way of asking families to talk about these issues, so the decision, when and if you ever found yourself in that way, would not be as painful, and you know what your relatives' desires are in regards to this issue. From then I went on and worked with these national transplant and state transplant units, and things really moved very quickly after that. So I think out of all the things I've done, it's probably had the most impact. But there's a kind of pattern in my method, which I'm happy to talk about later.
And later on, if they keep telling us where they succeeded, I'll tell you about a couple of mine that didn't. Catherine.
I'm supposed to be funny, but I probably won't be. Thanks, Claire, for that. Look, I suppose I'm a lawyer and I've got a suit on. We're pretty conservative. Lawyers are generally pretty conservative people, but the questions came across. So, like all good lawyers, I immediately looked for the definition of what innovation means. I could tell you about my attempt at hot power yoga, but it doesn't have a happy ending. So Shakti said, talk about feel the fear. I felt it, that we'll leave that to one side. I also fell asleep a lot, so I probably, wasn't a good student. I suppose, when I look at innovation, I think of things like, and this comes from the dictionary, not from me, as I said, I'm a lawyer, changing processes and changing the way things work for the benefit of where you work or the community or the rest. I wish I could tell you about a story where I've had a massive impact on the community in which I live. I haven't. But I think that there have been significant changes that not only me but some of the other particular women that work with me have been able to introduce to our workforce that are for the benefit of those people at work. And largely this comes about, I suppose, that I like most people my age, went to university outside Newcastle. There was no law school at Newcastle then, so quickly work out how old I am, and add a few years. I went to university in Sydney and I worked in Sydney, and then I moved back to Newcastle, and when I first did, not long had I been back in Newcastle, and I went to the district court, local court, whatever, I think it was the district court actually, to do the mentions list that day, and it was completely different to the way things operated in Sydney. But what was of most surprise to me was that a note was passed along the row of, junior lawyers sitting there, and I got this note. And I opened it up and it said, "Dear Ms Wilkinson, would you like to go out to dinner with me?" What? And I immediately looked around the room for, well, who the hell sent me this? And there was a fellow at the other end with a big beaming smile. I sort of narrowed it down and went, well, it must be him. Gee, they do things strangely in this town. But anyway, I knocked back the dinner invitation, but the note proudly went on the notice board at Sparke, Helmore for quite a considerable period of time. I'd arrived. But then subsequent to that, mind you, he did ask me out again, but I did say no again. But anyway, that's another story.
That was the sexual harassment case.
Yeah, well, if only. Really missed that opportunity. I suppose the next thing that really was one of the impetus for me to think about how, women in the workplace and how we work and what is of importance to us was that some years later I remember having a conversation with a male lawyer who wasn't from Newcastle, and he was getting a bit frustrated with my view of this particular matter, and I suppose he hit sort of rock bottom, and he said, look, can you get your boss on the phone? So I got the phone and I held it to my chest for the right amount of time, somewhere between 1 and 3 seconds. I went, oh, that'd be me. And I just thought, well, the profession is changing. When I went through university, there were 3/4 of the students were men, 25% were women, and that has completely moved over the last 20 plus years. And now the statistics tell us that there are about 52% men and 48% women. And it's really become, there's been a massive shift in the number of students that come through that are female. And what back in 2011, I participated in a program with the Law Society about women in the legal profession and the things that they cope well with, the things that they don't cope well with, and what we can try and do to support them. And one of the things that came out of a study that they had done was the massive drop-off rates for females in the profession after 5 years. So people graduated from university and they'd hit around 30 and they'd drop out and they wouldn't come back. And the statistics were quite frightening. And it didn't take Einstein to work out that pretty much married up with the time when women were leaving the workforce to have children. So what were we doing to support women to come back to the workforce? And I suppose one of the things that, has now become very much commonplace is paid parental leave, all of the support networks. But for me, I think that a large part of what I've tried to do over a considerable period of time is make sure that those women that do decide to have families have an opportunity to come back, and they come back to a career that they've invested a lot of time, a lot of money and a lot of effort into, and so have we, and get those people back into the workforce. As a working mother, and I'm sure other working mothers in this room will understand, they're pretty efficient. They know how to get through many, many tasks, and let's face it, I bet if you're a working mum, you can do your makeup at the traffic lights as well as I can. Having said that, so one of the things that I looked at was, well, what sort of support networks and what things do people need? And quite often it's just a person to talk to, and it can be broader than that, and it can be about making sure that they feel that they have a career, that they have something to come back to when they've had their parental leave. And there's now, I suppose, what we've introduced at work and certainly in other places is those more formal mechanisms. But back in, I won't call it the early days, but some years ago, it was more those informal things. And having had a family myself, that was one of the things that I knew I would struggle with. Well, how am I going to get back, and how's, will it just be, am I going to be able to cope, and can I balance things? And I think that particularly participating with the Law Society on hearing different views across the state and in different areas as to how people were coping with these things was one of the things that I thought, well, we really need to look at how we change our processes. And quite honestly, that was about educating workforce, educating clients and educating others that not only are you important at work and the work that you do is vital, but, childcare centres shut at 6 o'clock. So you just got to go. You can't leave your child on the doorstep. And that if a child is sick, well, then so be it. That's got to take priority. And with all of that, I suppose, has become things like greater use and reliance on IT systems and our, electronic communication. I'm pretty hopeless at it, but I still struggle through all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's one of the innovations that I suppose I'm most proud of, is making sure that those systems work, and they work for the benefit of the staff that we have and for women in the legal profession, that they do make up 50% of the lawyers that you're going to deal with, and they are people that we can't afford to lose. And the dropout rate was so astronomical that I think as a profession across New South Wales, there have been innovative steps to try and make sure that that doesn't happen. I think it's a bit sad, really, if you spend all that time at university and then you drop out altogether because you just can't seem to cope and manage with it. So that's probably my story.
Thank you, Catherine. I think it's really appropriate that you focused on workplace situations there, because for women, work can be both a burden and an amazing liberator. I was recalling earlier today, talking to one of our attendees, a comment that G.K. Chesterton, I think, made in regard to the increasing demand of women for education and employment, in the early 20th century. His comment was, women rose up as a wave and shouted, "We will not be dictated to," and promptly became stenographers. So work is really important, I think, for women, and removing barriers for women's free and full participation in the workforce is obviously critically important. So thank you. So, yeah?
We have hands up. Who knows what a stenographer is?
Oh, good point. Oh, look, there we are. See, I knew that.
It's you young'uns.
Yes, it's ancient technology. So now I'd like to call upon Professor McMillen to answer the same question, something innovative and what the impact was.
Complete nightmare when you can't actually think what you've done that's innovative, to be honest. I've got 3 vignettes. First is, I don't know if anyone remembers fax machines, but I'd like to take you to the 1990s, and when fax machines were stopping people in their tracks. You stuff something in one end and it comes out in another country. Just people would be shaking their heads in supermarkets. How does it work? Don't know, but you put it in one end, it comes out the other. In America. And so I was a new head of department. I was 36. I had 3 children under 5. We got this new job and my family had moved so I could be head of department. But of course, I had no idea what I was doing. And the reason they'd appointed me was it was the worst house in a good street. Very good university, but let's say it was a doer-upper as a department. It needed work, needed a lot of work. And you put a 36-year-old young professor in and see how she goes. Right, so the first staff meeting, and we're all juggling the responsibilities as you do with the kids, and I'm going in trying to look very professional with the baby stain on the shoulder. And staff meeting, this is the testing time for the new female head of department, 36, with predominantly slightly older, by which I mean a great deal older, and extraordinarily good, actually, academics, sitting around the table, eyeing her up. First item on the agenda was the fax machine. And I'm thinking, what is this? I'm ready for the innovative curricula. How do we build research? But no, it's the fax machine. Now, the fax machine is the innovative technique. So I thought, we'll just take this easy, as you do when you don't know quite what you're dealing with. And first 20 minutes was how we should not use the fax machine. Well, who should not have access to the fax machine? It seemed to me that almost everybody in the department should not have access to the fax machine except professors, because they were obviously much more adept at using the fax machine than anyone else. And this went on for some time, and we were codifying it, as academics want to do. We had sub-clauses, and perhaps if you earned your own salary as a research professor from the National Health and Medical Research Council, we might let you use it under supervision. So at just one point I paused and there was a sort of pause in the proceedings, and it was going great. It was a great meeting. It had every opportunity to go on for about 3 hours and get more sub-clauses on it. And I said, look, Gab, what's the purpose of the fax machine? Well, we'll be more connected to other countries and we can send our papers into journals by the fax machine and we can do quicker correspondence and have our papers accepted. And I said, great. So that would be good for the whole department, wouldn't it? Well, yes, it would. Look, I said, why don't we pilot a scheme for a year? We'll have everyone have access to it. We'll record it when we send it in case there's any abuse of the fax machine. And at the end of the year, we'll see how it's running. Well, we all sat down and thought that might be a good idea. So innovation in practice. It seemed to me at that time that my engagement at that point suggested that really clever and smart people sometimes have difficulty with innovation. And sometimes you're not as clever and you're not the smartest person in the room, but you somehow can suggest a way, and I've often found, and for those of you in the university, please do not spill this, that a pilot is a very good way to persuade people over the chasm of what might happen if we let people use the fax machine. And I've used that quite a lot in my future. And the next one was, 3 vignettes, if I'm allowed, Claire, because I haven't got anything really. The other one was I have been known as a Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research, and to stand up with my early career researcher group, we are trying to develop and run a whole session on Project Runway. Now, some of you may not know Project Runway. Those of you who do will not tell the others it's a reality TV show based on a process of identifying who produces the best design of the day and voting the one who didn't off, because otherwise you'd blow my cover. But I happen to have come across Project Runway a couple of times, and what I liked about it was that it spoke to you had to have a creative idea. You had to execute that idea beautifully, and you had to have the right tools to do so. And as a metaphor for research, it spoke really well to the early career researchers because each of those elements has to be there. And when one of them isn't, you see the immediate difference between disaster and something shoddy and something that you don't know why but is going to stand out in a runway. And this is research. The idea has to be very creative. The tools you use have to be the right tools, and implementation has to be executed with precision. So there was a sort of way of translating, for me, the process. But really, for me, innovation in research is those wonderful moments where you're explaining it, but doing it is another thing entirely. And as someone who's spent a deal of time, I think Claire said 30 years, we'll a little while, engaging in what and how our nutritional or our environment when we're developing alters our health risk for life. I did spend a deal of time working with a really committed group of people, and the privilege of supervising PhD students is a remarkable opportunity, and some 50 of those, and it's just terrific. But we worked really hard on understanding why, whether you're overweight at the time of conception or you then diet at the time of conception, what influence that has on the embryo, which is just a pinpoint of cells, and how the embryo takes that nutritional information because it's very, very good at transducing it, and it sets changes in its structures and its genes so that it references what it thinks its nutritional environment is going to be. And in that is a story and a journey towards a risk of metabolic disease. Now, as a scientist, it's wonderful to engage in that journey, but it's not Project Runway. It's 20 years to really get to the mechanism. But what gave me greatest pleasure was having a call to contribute to the Prime Minister's Science, Engineering Innovation Group, who were working on the issues of perinatal health for Indigenous women. And this issue of having an intergenerational cycle of disadvantage because mothers, Indigenous mums, were at greater risk of obesity before conceiving and at greater risk of having a poor nutritional environment at conception. And this was carrying on to an intergenerational cycle of poor metabolic health for the next generation. And that was a time when the scientist in me, whilst proud of the mechanisms we had identified, could see that on a national landscape this had an application. And so that for me, I think, was a moment where I thought this work and now is impacting on dietary interventions before pregnancy gave me most pride. But I still think my Project Runway talk is really good.
Thank you. Thank you. And to finish off, Shakti Durga, are you happy to talk about an innovation that you've tried?
I think I can probably do that. Thanks. So just to set the record straight, my previous career was actually is in the law as a barrister. So in fact, Catherine and I worked together for a long time. And so it's been a delight to see her again this evening because we haven't seen each other for years. After nearly 20 years in practice, I resigned or closed up shop as a barrister in 2001 to pursue my passion. And my passion was something very unexpected in my life, which was that I started to teach meditation and energetic healing techniques, which I started to learn as a result of things that had happened in my life. So I graduated from City University with a combined degree of economics and law, and very soon went into legal practice, which I very much enjoyed, and law was very good to me and I got a lot out of it. When I was in my early 30s, my marriage collapsed, and being a good Catholic girl, I really hadn't expected that I was going to be a person who had divorce in their life, And so combined with a bit of postnatal depression because my baby had recently been born, I was in a really bad space, and a colleague of mine in my chambers said to me, "You're a mess." I thought, thanks for the support. You should go and do some work on yourself, get a coach, do something, learn to meditate. And I thought it was the most preposterously stupid idea because I wasn't interested in spirituality. The only kind of spirituality I was interested in was Chardonnay. I really thought that would do in most situations, and up until then it had. However, I found that when I went to these beautiful, kind people who showed me how to meditate and so forth, that it was extraordinary what happened and how differently I felt. And I was a person who had been very successful, acquired a lot of things, and a lovely house on the water in Sydney, and, a fabulous lifestyle that a lot of people would, aspire to. But there was a part of me that thought, there's something more, and I don't know what that more is. And truly, Chardonnay didn't do it. And I really found on the spiritual journey that I've gone on that I've found that thing. And to me, I now encourage people as we've formed a cluster. Shanti Mission is a cluster business. It started in a garage at Kurumbong in a house that I owned. And it was a triple car garage, not just your ordinary garage. But it was me and a couple of my colleagues, one of them's here tonight, who was there in the early days, and we just started exploring, experimenting, sifting and culling in the area of energetic healing. It's a very new area. It's an area where there's a lot of sort of untested stuff, and so we were at pains to try and analyse as best we could, not being scientists, what worked, what didn't work, and to be really rigorous in our analysis of how it was that you could utilise energetic healing for a whole range of things. So Shanti Mission started off as a school for healers, and from there we found that the healing modalities we were using were actually creating within us resources we didn't know we had, that the methodology we were using and the education that we were giving people was actually transforming us from the inside out. And we were a bit surprised because, you know, we were kind of making it up as we go along based on, you know, research, but really putting it into practice as innovators. And so what happened, just to cut a long story short, is that by about 2007 we had our methodology pretty much in place about what we were doing, and in the last 7 years, from the garage in Kurumbong, we now have 1,000 square metre space in Kurumbong. We had a centre up here in the Newcastle Mall. We have a number of centres in Sydney, Melbourne, the Southern Highlands. In fact, we operate in 5 states of Australia plus 5 states of America. We have teachers in Canada. We recently had someone in Brazil and in England. So we are getting global penetration. I still believe Shanti Mission is an infant business, but I hope that in the future it will be a business that the hunter will be proud of, because this is where it was born. Yeah. So integral to Shanti Mission really is that we help people be spirited people. And I'll tell you why you might be interested in becoming more spirited yourself. And that's because spirited people have a sense of personal empowerment that does not flow just from their positional power. When you're a spirited person, someone can take away your positional power. You can get sacked from your job. You can get voted out of office. But you're still a person who has gravitas. People still want to know what your opinions are because you're empowered in a very fundamental way that transcends just the position. Do you understand what I'm saying? So to do that, to actually become a spirited and empowered person, I believe we have to overcome a lot of fears that are kind of in us, maybe from an early age, fear of people not appreciating us, fear of not being respected, and fear of the unknown. And I think because this is an innovation conference, it's really interesting to look at the fear of the unknown. And we might think we want to innovate, but then when people suggest we do things differently, we get very reactive about it. And that's just human nature. So helping people to overcome the hubris, the ego, the human nature in a good-hearted kind of way. You know, we kind of love them into loving themselves, and we support people. And we now have about 300 therapists who are practicing what we call Ignite Your Spirit therapy, because that's exactly what it does. And we have around about 100 teachers too who are spreading out around the place. But spirited people also tend to empower other people, you know, because they know there's plenty and there's plenty to share. So we were talking before about competition and cooperation. And what was that word? Co-opetition. I really liked that. So that's what we do. We really help people to cooperate with each other. And for me, you know, some top tips in how to be innovative is do what you believe in, have the faith of your convictions, don't let fear stop you or get in the way, and make sure that you're doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, for the right motivation in the right degree, and then you kind of can't go wrong. So to me, spirituality is all about inspired people making a difference in the world and helping everyone to have a better quality of life. So let's all be innovators together and all be spirited together, and that's probably the biggest innovation I ever did in my life, was changing from being a barrister to a spiritual teacher. Wow.
Well, that concludes day 2 of our Innovation Forum. There's 4 fabulous women to share their experiences. We'd like you now to stay and share a little hospitality and some networking and meet some of the other great people in the room. We've laid on a little bit of hospitality because we're a lean, mean machine around here. But please stay, please chat, please ask questions, and hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow at the Creative Industries Day. Thank you, and thank you again.